being emotionally aware of ourselves and other people as well. It's about teaching them about the world. It's about not putting them in front of a TV or an iPad or a screen and letting them learn about the world that way. It's about actually showing them the world.
Welcome back to Raising Men. My guest today is Simon Rinne. Simon is the founder and clinical lead at Mindful Men and the host of the Mindful Men podcast, a podcast about using mindfulness to cultivate a more meaningful existence. Simon, thank you so much for being here.
Shaun, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to having a good chat.
Now, so do me a favor, tell me about mindfulness and what is the impact on parents and sons?
Oh, fantastic question. So mindfulness, I guess, means different things to different people, but for me, it means conscious awareness. So being really conscious about what we're doing, bringing the subconscious to the conscious, being mindful, being present, and particularly useful for parents who might be struggling with being on the same planet as their kids in the moment. And
Absolutely.
Thinking about work, thinking about study, or thinking about whatever else has to happen. So mindfulness enables us to be more present parents as well. So that's, in a nutshell, what it means for me.
I love that definition. It feels very actionable. I'm really looking forward to digging into it. Now, I know from understanding your background, I understand that there is a lot of struggle in your history, and struggles come, they get imposed on us externally, and that creates a feedback loop where we just kind of go through it internally as well, and we cause our own struggles to some degree. Can you take us back to the season where you realized that something needed to change in your life, and what happened with that?
Oh, so many seasons in between.
Right.
I To take it back a little bit and rein me in if you need me, because I'll go on and on and on about
By
this.
all
But
means.
essentially, when I was 8 years old, I developed obsessive compulsive disorder, which remained undiagnosed for 20 years. And along the way, developed depression and generalized anxiety as well, but again, remained undiagnosed. And for many years, I drank alcohol to cope and to manage.
Sure.
But it was around 2012 when my now wife encouraged me to go and get support for my mental health. And for a couple of years, I kind of deflected and pushed it back on her, saying, well, I don't have an issue. If you've got an issue, maybe you should go and talk about it. But it took about 2 years for her to keep pressing that button, and then me realizing that I now need to go get help. So I did. I went to my GP, and then I went to see a psychologist and started the mental health treatment that I needed. But I expected a magic fix. I expected to go in, do a couple sessions, come out and be healed. And that didn't happen. So fast forward to 2020. I'm not sure if you remember what happened in 2020, but we had this thing called COVID. We had this thing called COVID. I was working from home because we were locked down. We had 2 kids under 3, so my wife was home with the kids. I was still drinking. My mental health was off the rocket, and I essentially burnt out. So I was in a really high-stress work environment. I was studying a master's degree at the same time. I had too many things on my plate. And through burnout, this is where I discovered mindfulness through my healing journey. And it really put a lot of things into perspective. But it wasn't just about mindfulness. It was about connecting in with what's called a lived experience therapist. So someone who had an experience of burnout and was willing to share their experience of burnout. And for the first time in my therapy journey, it felt like I was being seen and heard and understood properly for the first time, because I'd been to all these different therapists, but it felt like there was always a disconnect.
Yeah.
And so when I got this connection, both through the therapist and my GP, actually, my GP shared about his burnout story too, I started to realize, there's some, other people out there that feel like me and have experience similar to me, and we're speaking the same language. and through therapy found mindfulness and this ability to come back to the present and be present, because that's what I really needed when I was burnt out. I was on a different planet. The lights were on, but nobody was home. And that would be with work, that would be with my kids and my wife, and I didn't like that. So this is 2020, and so 5 years on, really starting to work on the mindfulness piece, but also recovery from a proactive perspective rather than a reactive perspective.
I'm guessing that if your experience is anything like mine in things like this, you kick yourself for how much time you spent in denial about what you could do about your situation. And like you wasted all those years. Why is talking about mental health and seeking out mental health such a struggle for so many men? I experience it too, and I really can't even access why.
I'm glad you asked that question because it's probably where the story starts, actually. So I'm on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, but I grew up in a place called Adelaide in South Australia. So a different state, different part of Australia.
Isn't that
And
place
in
that
the
has a 30-minute daylight savings time?
Oh, it's 30 minutes, yeah, at the moment. And then on the East Coast, we've got an hour, depending on if you're in Melbourne or Sydney or Hobart. So we're a bit of an odd country in terms of daylight saving.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But I grew up in Adelaide.
All right, I didn't mean to derail you.
No, yeah, you're all right. I'm all about derails and tangents. So that's all good. I grew up in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, which is very working class. It's lower socioeconomic. My dad worked at the council. My mum worked as a cleaner. We weren't rich by any means. And in the 80s and 90s, which is when I grew up, we didn't talk about mental health. In fact, to be a boy and to be a man was to be strong and tough and suck it up and bottle it down and all those types of things. And that's how we dealt with emotions.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that is that boys were, I guess, allowed to show anger. And that's the case for many boys. It was socially acceptable for a boy to show anger. They still get in trouble.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was more socially acceptable than to, say, sit there and cry about what's going on and feel sad.
So true.
And so I embodied that. I didn't have any positive male role models, including my father and sports coaches and teachers and friends who would go into the emotional side of things. And so I learned, just like many boys and many men today, and over the generations as well, that to be a boy and to be a man was to suck it up.
Yeah.
And so when I turned 8 and I developed OCD, I didn't have the words to express or the knowledge of how to express what was happening internally for me. So it stayed a silent struggle. And there was a little bit of shame, a little bit of guilt about feeling different as well. But I persevered and we kept going with it. Now, this really ramped up around 13 when mum and dad separated. So me and my little brother, we moved out with mum. And my 2 oldest brothers stayed with dad. And this broke the family dynamic as well. But I felt all of a sudden like there needed to be a man of the house, and that man was me as a 13-year-old.
Wow, what a burden.
And that's what life was like in that period of time. There was a man of the house. All my friends, there was a man of the house, whether it was a father, whether it was an uncle staying with them, whether it was a grandparent.
Sure.
But that was me as a 13-year-old. And this is where my mental health really declined because my obsessive compulsive disorder ramped up, my depression ramped up, my anxiety ramped up, but I didn't know how to talk about it. And so I just kept plugging away, trying to live day to day. And then eventually found alcohol around 15. And alcohol helped to slow my brain and slow the emotions and feel normal, if that makes sense.
It does.
And it just kept getting bottled and buried and buried and buried. And this is what I see time in and time out in the clinic work that I do now as a therapist, is this constant bottling up of emotions and this inability to share and express in a healthy way. In fact, one of the most common questions I get when we have someone call the clinic is, Simon, we're looking for a positive male role model for my 19-year-old son or my 18-year-old son. And so that's the work that we go on, is this trying to show them that, yes, you can talk about this stuff and you're not going to be seen as weak or anything like that. It's actually a strong thing to talk about your mental health. But when we go back to why men are like this and why boys are like this, it's this concept called social constructions of masculinity. So we're socially constructed to feel and be a certain way based on our environment and based on time as well. So I often talk about the 80s and 90s because that was a different time to 2025.
Certainly.
You know, we're talking about mental health now, whereas we didn't do that in the 80s and 90s. And with the work that I do with older men in my clinic, the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, they didn't talk about mental health.
Right.
We'd do a lot of work with veterans, for example. And the older veterans, so I'm talking World War II, even Vietnam, they're more reluctant to talk about mental health than, say, veterans who have been to Afghanistan or Iraq or anything like that, because it's just so different. It's a different time period, and it's still seen as a weakness, particularly for men.
Yeah, I definitely. It's almost like it's a self-imposed stigma that we impose it on ourselves. We feel shame about not being perfect. But if you're if you don't if you're not able to recognize your own imperfections, then you have no way of eliminating them.
That's right, and that's where mindfulness actually plays a really good part, is recognizing and being aware and self-aware of what's going on inside of us, and
Do
that's
you
why I love it.
feel that mindfulness and therapy can help dismantle that kind of outdated model of masculinity, and then what do you replace it with?
Well, I guess new concepts of masculinity. So masculinity in itself isn't a bad thing, but often what's portrayed is that it is a bad thing because we usually talk about it within the concepts of patriarchy
Yeah.
or toxic masculinity or family and domestic violence or even suicide as well. And so when we talk about it within those contexts, it can be a negative tone. It can be a negative reflection of what it means to be a boy and a man.
Yeah.
But there is something called healthy masculinity, and this is what we work on in the clinics, is around looking back over how we learnt to be a boy and a man. In fact, I did that session yesterday with a client. What did it mean to be a boy and a man growing up for him, wherever he grew up, and within the time period that he grew up as well? And then reflecting on what does it mean to be a dad now? And what does it mean to be a boy for his sons in the work that we've been doing as well? So we look back in a way that is critically reflective, and we look back at why we were the way we were and the influences around us. And then we look at the present, how are we showing up today? And then we look forward to the future as how do we want to show up? How do we want our boys particularly and our daughters to be when they're adults? How do we make them or help them and support them to be good humans? And it starts with us. It starts with us recognizing how we are and then growing from there.
You've talked a lot about your work with men. What is one misconception that you see that men have about seeking help?
A misconception is that they don't have the ability to seek help. We all have the ability.
Yeah.
It's just about knowing when's the right time and finding the right support as well. Like I'd been in and out of therapy for the better part of 10 years and been to different therapists, but I never really felt connected to a lot of the therapists. So it felt like a chore rather than something that was self-development and something that I could achieve success through.
Yeah.
So it's about, yeah, like so many therapists who don't share an element of themselves. It feels like they're just reading from a book to help you.
Yeah.
Which is what I like to do because I've lived through, better half of the 3 decades of mental health struggle, is bringing in that lived experience. And once we can do that, we can foster a stronger connection with men because they can recognize that they're not the only person in the room who's had struggle. And they can see me doing the work. And I always say I'm a therapist in therapy, and that the work that we do in our sessions is the work that I do on myself. So it works. I know it works, but I also recognize that what works for me doesn't necessarily work for them. So it's all about showing them the way, showing men the way, and going, this is a pathway I've taken. It might be similar to yours, it might be different, but we'll work together as a team. Men like to work as a team, and we'll come up with solutions together. We'll figure out what works for you. And so this misconception that men can't do it is really wrong, because actually once they come in, you can't shut them up. They just want to talk, talk, and talk, and talk.
Yeah,
But it's
because
about
you feel
finding that right
around your home.
connection.
I can,
Yeah.
the metaphor that comes to mind for that for me is it's like finding an exercise that resonates with you. And it's like you really want to be go to the gym and be doing weights, but then you end up in a yoga class and you're frustrated. And well, that's exercise, right? And then you go to a Pilates class and it's a different thing. And then you join a running group and it's just it's not the fit. It's not what you're looking for. And then you finally get to the gym and you have a trainer who works out himself and he pushes rates too. And you're like, yes, this is what I've been looking for. And there's nothing wrong with those other modalities. There's nothing wrong with yoga and Pilates and running, but it's not right for me.
Mm. 100%. That reminded me of high school, right? Like, so I was very athletic, did a lot of sports. There was one sport that I absolutely hated, and that was netball. And so I used to go to the courts and shoot hoops and play basketball, and I liked it because it was running around, right? But netball, when you get the ball, you've got to stop. And I felt really restricted there. Like I felt like I had to move. It was unnatural for me not to move, because it wasn't just basketball. I played Australian rules footy. I played soccer. I did athletics. So always on the move.
Right.
And it's the same. Like
Yeah,
that
all
was
of
just the
those
wrong
things. Anytime
sport.
you're touching the ball, you're the target. You need to get going.
That's right. And so I had to move. And so it's about finding the right support for you. So sometimes that's therapy, but sometimes a lot of the case is actually self-care. It's about what exercise are you doing, or what food are you eating, or how you're sleeping, or, we talk about the addiction stuff. So drinking, drugs, gambling, porn addiction, all those types of things. How do we find balance in everything so that everything's working together as opposed to apart?
It's a feedback mechanism, isn't it? Because as your kind of health declines, you seek out more of those self-medicating activities, which cause your health decline even more, which causes you to seek them out even more. And you just keep spiraling down, don't you?
Well, that's the dopamine hit, right? So we
Yeah.
do things that, like drinking for me, felt good initially and it was for fun.
Yeah.
But over time, I was getting those dopamine hits. But then the more and more I drank, the more and more I needed to get that same hit.
Right.
And so it's the same with all sorts of addictions. Is the more we do it, the more we need to do it in order to find that same level of satisfaction. But we can get through those things through something like therapy, or even talking about it, or even just reevaluating our values and our goals in life. We can actually do it without a therapist. It's just about mindset. How do we get into the right mindset and do things for the right reasons, and do things in a sustainable way as well, not throwing everything at it all at once?
Yeah. So let's connect this to the mission of raising powerful, capable men. What does being a mindful parent mean to you?
Well, it's, I think, a lot of patience.
Absolutely.
So I've got an 8-year-old, I've got a 5-year-old. So and I also coach under 8 soccer. So you can imagine 10 8-year-olds running around trying to herd cats on a tin roof, basically. It's about being patient. It's about being present as well. So focusing on our kids rather than on our work or what we have to do tomorrow or whatever else is going on. And I think for the modern day father, particularly, is about being emotionally aware. And it's emotionally aware of ourselves. How are we going? How are we showing up? But also supporting our kids to be emotionally aware and understand that it's okay to be not okay. And it's actually a safe thing for them to come to us and talk about their emotions, because what often happens in therapy is the guys that come in, particularly the dads, they want to be anything but a version of their dad.
Yeah.
So it's about supporting parents, both mums and dads, but particularly dads, to have that emotional awareness, to have that awareness of where they've come from, where they are, where they want to be, and being as present and patient as possible.
I imagine that even if you yourself had an amazing dad, there's still some amount of that departure that is necessary because the world is so different than it was when we were children. And so in order to give our sons the skills that they're going to need to be powerful in the world that they're going to grow up in, it can't be the same old playbook, can it?
Well, it can't be, because you just look at the way the world's going.
Yeah.
I had this when our kids started school. The principal sat down with all the new parents and was talking about career pathways, for example. And I remember my dad, he had 2 career pathways. He was a bricklayer initially, and then he went to the council, and mum was a cleaner, and then she became an enrolled nurse over time. And I've looked at my career, and I've had probably about 10 different jobs.
Yeah.
And I'm only, 42.
Yeah.
But the principal sat down and he said, your children will have up to 20 plus careers in their lifetime. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a reflection of the time. Technology is advancing. We're doing things differently. There's going to be new industries that grow. There's going to be old industries that die out through technology. And so it's about our ability to adapt and be adaptable and be accepting of adaptation as well, not holding on to those old playbooks. Now, what often happens is we revert back to how our parents parented us often. So my dad was a yeller, for example. And so sometimes when I'm dysregulated, I might yell at my kids. But I consciously am aware that that's not the dad that I want to be.
Yeah.
So I've gone back to the old playbook because it's ingrained in me. But then I've also turned the page to the new playbook and going, okay, this is what I've got to work on next time. And so now we're talking about being an imperfect parent and being okay with that, because we can't get it right all the time. As long as we're getting it right most of the time, then we're doing all right.
Yeah, and it actually gives you an opportunity to apologize to your son and say, listen, man, that's not the way I need to be acting. I'm really sorry. And that's modeling the right behavior.
Well, how many of our parents did that?
Right. It wasn't part of the equation back then.
It wasn't. So being able to rebuild bridges or mend bridges is a really important part, and that's emotional awareness. That's being present. It's recognizing that we're not perfect, and it's mending the relationship. Because the last thing I want as a dad is my son and my daughter to grow up resenting me, because I wasn't there and I wasn't emotionally aware. And that's a constant fear that I have. Knowing where I've come from, knowing the work that I do and hearing the stories that I hear every single day. But it's not something that's going to hold me back. It's going to be something that fuels me to be the best dad that I can be and the best partner I can be to my wife too.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that's going back to that feedback thing. That's a virtuous feedback. That's a virtuous feedback loop. You do those things, you get rewarded for it. Your life is easier. It feels like you're closer, more connected. You're more of a man that you want to be, and so that causes you to engage with more healthy activities and think about things more in a more healthful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about things like anxiety and depression, for example, we're often stuck in a negative feedback loop, whether it's thinking too much about the future. So that's that hyper arousal state, that's that anxiety state, or thinking too much about the past. That's that hypo arousal state. And that can get stuck. And that's when we start feeling like we're failing as parents or as men as well. So it's about recognizing those emotions when they come up and recognizing how do we get through that so that we can be more present with ourselves, but also our families as well. And it's doing the things like self-care that we talked about, but it's also doing the things that make us feel good. We're too, I think, focused on the hustle these days in the 24/7 world that we live in. And there's not enough downtime where we can relax and rest, recuperate, and be really present in the moment. Now, the feedback loop as well, it reinforces different behaviors. So if we're doing negative things, it's going to reinforce that as a coping mechanism. So we're going to be stuck in that negative way. But if we can flip the script and think a bit more positively, and that's really hard, I recognize that it can be hard in the modern world. We can turn things around, and we can come out of things and grow and be better dads as we do it as well.
There's, what you're saying really resonates with me because I feel like I have to be doing something or else I'm dropping the ball. I'm not being the parent I need to be. I'm not being the worker I need to be. I'm not succeeding. And if I'm ever sitting idle, it doesn't feel right. And that's unhealthy, isn't it? That's what you're describing as part of the thing. I need to be able to unplug. I need to be able to be present with my kids. I need to be able to disconnect and just ride in the right groove, don't I?
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to a dad yesterday in the clinic, and we were talking about his memories of his father, and it was to provide. And so when we link that in with men in general and the patriarchy and patriarchal society, it's men are providers.
Yes.
And so if we're sitting idle and not providing, whether it's financially, whether it's security, whether it's whatever, we feel like we're not living up to this notion of what it means to be a man and a leader as well. But the rest component is really important, because back when our parents were parents, well, they're still parents, I guess, but back a few generations ago, they were 9 to 5.
Right.
They weren't 24/7 like we are today.
And they came home.
I work with it. They came home after work, and we came home when the lights came on the street lamps and so forth, and we were together. And on the weekends, we didn't do a huge amount of things just to keep ourselves entertained. We learnt how to entertain ourselves if we're bored, and so it's a very different world that we live in. So I think a lot of parents these days are trying to learn to disconnect. And be more connected with their families through the disconnection of work, particularly because of that hustle. And COVID was a bit of a negative part of this, because during COVID, everyone thought they needed to get side hustles. And this is where the podcast world exploded. Right. That became a side hustle.
Absolutely.
And so it's just about learning to disconnect, but be connected at the same time. It's a real struggle. But we can provide, in that moment when we are disconnected, we're providing emotional security. We're providing great fatherhood and motherhood, and we're providing fun.
Yeah. And modeling.
These are the things. Yeah, and these are the things that our kids want.
Yeah, I think since becoming a father, what it has been really clear to me, the myriad of tensions that we experience. And that tension between wanting to be a provider and not wanting to work all the time, or not knowing that working all the time isn't the way to be the best provider, because providing money isn't the only thing you're supposed to be providing. You're supposed to be providing safety. You're supposed to be providing comfort. You're supposed to be providing, walled garden, so to speak. And there's a tension between those two things. There's a saying that goes, nobody ever wished that they spent more time in the office on their deathbed. And I think that that's true, but it's also not true, because there are people who go to their deathbed wishing that they had provided better for their families. And so again, it goes back to that tension. You need to find the right mix in order to get the best balance of that. And that's the difficulty. And I feel like that's the thing that mindfulness can really help cultivate in ourselves.
Absolutely. I often talk about control in sessions with my clients. It's when we feel like maybe our mental health has got out of control, and physical health as well, because it's one and the same. We try to control it by doing certain things. So for me, it was drinking for 25 years. I tried to control my mental illness with drinking.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily healthy.
Sure.
And there was also a very big cultural element here as well. It's very acceptable to drink in Australia. We're big drinkers, right?
Yeah.
But I often say, in order to regain control, we have to let go of control. And so this is us recognizing that stuff in our life is happening, things that we can control, but also things that we can't control. Like maybe we do need to go and work a job or 2 jobs or 3 jobs or whatever we do. But there's certain things in our life that we can control. And a lot of that in the parenting space is being present, being mindful, being connected. When we have, even if it's 5 minutes a day, if we're in and out of the door because we're providing for our family, if we're providing that 5 minutes a day where our kids see us doing what we're doing with a purpose and with values, and we're not just, ignoring them, we're actually connecting in with them as much as we can, then they learn that, they see that, and that's what helps them to grow as well. But one of the other things that we learn and I teach in my sessions is about living by our values. So when we are looking back on our deathbed, and we can look at our lives and reflect, did I achieve what I wanted to achieve? If we can live most of our life according to a good set of values, and that's what we can impart to our kids, then we can ultimately fall asleep knowing that we've done our best, and
I think that's
our
right.
kids can learn from that.
And at least you did it on purpose, right? Whatever you did it intentionally and with purpose. And you should feel good about that, right? As opposed to, you don't want to look back and think, man, all that stuff happened by accident. And even if it was good, all that stuff happened by accident. So tell me this. When and how do we start to cultivate mindfulness in our sons?
From day one, which is really hard.
Yeah.
So when we think about parenting, it's often the dad goes to work and mum stays home.
Yeah.
So one option is to become a stay-at-home dad and be really present, right? So this is that connection piece. This is about connecting and actually challenging social norms, because this is a social norm thing, right? The dad goes to work, the mum stays home. So that's one element. I tried it for a little bit, but I really struggled with it. So we had to reverse that role. My wife reminded me of that yesterday, actually. But it's about connection, and it's about being there and being present. Now, mindfulness is not something you'd go to your kids to and say, let's be mindful, because they'll probably be like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
But it's through actions. It's through how we display living by values. It's about, being emotionally aware of ourselves and other people as well. It's about teaching them about the world. It's about not putting them in front of a TV or an iPad or a screen and letting them learn about the world that way. It's about actually showing them the world. It's about going camping. It's about fishing. It's about doing the things that make us feel good, but also slow down time at the same time, because we only have we don't have an infinite. We only have a certain number of Christmases with our families. Ultimately, those Christmases will run out.
That is such a powerful framing, that these activities are ways of slowing down time in a really pleasurable way. And it's the one way we have of extending this resource that is so limited. It's the one thing that we can't ever get back, but we can slow it down. That's such a powerful sentiment. I love it. How can we begin right now? What could I do when I get off this call to help raise my son in a way with strength and softness and being mindful, and give me one tactical thing that I could go do right now?
I think it's working on ourselves as dads. We got to start here within ourselves before we can even help somebody else. It's like the plane that's falling out of the sky. You got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help anyone else, because otherwise you're both going to perish. And so I think it's reflecting on how we're going today. How are we really going? Like, are we showing up in a way that we want to show up? Are we being the best dad that we can be? And if not, that's okay. We can turn things around. And so what I do is I liken it to the car tune-up. A lot of guys like cars or can kind of identify with a car. You
Sure.
take your car to the mechanic once a year, it gets service, and then it's back on the road. So our bodies are like the car body, and our minds are like the electronics that make everything work. So if we can tune that up yearly, whether it's through just even connecting with a GP or a therapist, for a few sessions a year, just to make sure that you're able to stay on the road, then that goes a long way to your better health, but then also you being able to be more present and mindful with your kids as well. Because if you're doing the work on you, then you can see it in others and you can help others along their journeys too.
Are there pitfalls or drawbacks that we should watch out for when trying to do this?
Well, I think it's bringing up old traumas, maybe old pains and having to work through them. But that's okay. That's part of the process. It's not about ignoring the past. It's about acknowledging it and identifying what you can learn from the past. And this is where therapists go, oh, well, tell me about your childhood. There's a reason for that, because they're looking at what happened, how were you formed, where did your beliefs come from, and then how do we retune them so that they serve you in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, and I can imagine that is, especially if you haven't grown up with the skills to deal with those kinds of strong emotions, it's all the more difficult to process all of that, isn't it?
Well, that's right. How can you get somewhere if you don't have a map?
Yeah.
And this is it. So this is therapy or a GP session, or even just talking with a friend or family member that you trust and respect.
Yeah.
These are the people that can give you the map to get where you want to
and
go.
maybe give yourself a little bit of grace about, this. Everybody has this, and it's good. It's okay.
I'd say a lot of grace. And one of the concepts that I've learned through mindfulness is Wabi-sabi. So it's the beauty and imperfection.
Okay. Yeah. I'm
not going to get it perfect every day, and my clients aren't going to get it perfect every day. But as long as they're learning and moving forward one step at a time, eventually they'll get to where they need to go.
So how do people learn more about mindful men and get involved, and what can we do to help bolster your program?
Well, I think it's about, we've got the podcast, as you mentioned earlier, we've got the Mindful Men podcast. I did that for about 2.5 years before I mindfully had to disconnect from that for a little while. So I'm on a bit of a hiatus, but there's lots of different conversations in there around men, masculinity, fatherhood, mental health as well. So check that out. Check out your podcast. Go through some of the old episodes as well. Keep in tune with those. If you're in Australia, we do therapy in Australia. So I'm an Australian therapist. So you can connect with us that way through our website. Check out our socials. I'm very active on socials and just putting out content, trying to inspire men to just recognize certain things in their lives. So, for example, October in Australia is Mental Health Awareness Month in Australia. So I'm doing a lot of mental health awareness content on there. So get involved in that, have a chat in that. And also you can join our Mindful Men Community Facebook group, which is for free. I do a weekly mindfulness tip on a Tuesday, and then I do a Thursday check-in video. So you can jump onto that, learn a bit more about mindfulness and become part of a bigger community.
I love that. All right. I love to finish up these conversations by putting you on the spot and asking for one principle. Just think of one principle that comes to mind that I should adopt in my life to make myself more mindful or stronger or better or anything at all. Give me one principle. It might be something that that you try to live yourself, or something you aspire to, or anything like that. What is one principle that you think that people should really look into and maybe adopt?
I think for men particularly, it's identifying what your core values are. and living by them. Once you know this, and there's, you only want 5 or 6, not too many. I've got a few guys that like 10 plus, but
Sure.
5 or 6 core values that you can live by every day, because this helps with things like motivation when you're feeling unmotivated. It helps
Yeah.
with reflection if something bad's happened and you want to reflect why that happened. It helps with us identifying why we feel certain emotions as well. But it also helps us to be the best parents and partners we can be and instill values on our children. Now, everybody's values are different, and it's also about recognizing that as well. So what I value is going to be different to what you value, and the same with our kids. So really look into what are your values and how can you live by them every day.
I think that is a fantastic principle. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing that. Simon, once again, thank you so much for joining us on Raising Men. I'll tell you, it has been an absolute pleasure to get to know you. I know that I have personally gotten tremendous value from this conversation. I hope our listeners have as well. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again. Simon is the founder and clinical lead at Mindful Men. He joins us from the Sunshine Coast, just north of Brisbane in Australia. Thanks again, Simon.